In this video, I'm going to show you a technique for removing your lights from your shots in post, so you can light your scene however you want and not have to worry about the gear being in the frame. Quick ethics statement, I got most of the gear in this video for free, but this video is not sponsored and nobody's controlling the content. I'm going to start by explaining this shot because it was the simplest to execute. Here I replaced my film light, which was the Godox LC500R, with a practical lamp in post. The LC500R is a super bright LED light with built-in barn doors, so it's easier to control. And it's easy to match this light with practicals because it goes from 2500K all the way up to 8500K in color temperature. Plus it has full RGB and effects modes. So that's the light I used to simulate the lamp in this scene. Now I'll take you through a breakdown of how I edited out my light and replaced it with the practical lamp. The basics of this effect are pretty simple. It's just a split screen, essentially. This is just the lamp that was ready in the living room. So first I filmed a static shot of the lamp, then I cleared the lamp out, added my LC500R, and filmed a shot of me sitting down. So here's me sitting, and here's the source that I'm going to try to composite into the shot, using the Draw Mask tool. So what I'm doing here is just drawing a very rough mask of the area that I'm going to want to keep. Now I adjust the feather of the mask, and you can see the shot is basically composited. Now this is obviously fake because the lighting on me doesn't match the lighting from this lamp at all. So what's required here is some color correction to make everything blend a bit better. So with just a little bit of color correction, this shot is already looking more believable. Of course, there's a very dark edge here that I would have to contend with either by adjusting my mask or by adjusting the lighting on this side or this side of the split screen. But that's just a matter of tweaking. Every shot's going to be different. But we still have a problem. This reflection up here is reflecting the original light over here. So that's very fake looking. So what I'm going to do is copy this shot, going to paste it on top there, going to remove the draw mask effect and create a new mask. So now I'm just going to outline the area that contains the reflection, and I'm going to feather it. And with a little bit of adjustment of the color, I can make that blend pretty seamlessly. So with a little bit of extra tweaking and color correction for mood, you get the final shot. This next shot uses basically the same technique, but it's a little more complicated because this time there's camera movement involved. So let's start by going through the lighting breakdown. I used the Godox UL150 as my key light, and to diffuse the light, I used a softbox and a grid. The UL150 is a 150 watt, daylight balanced, super bright LED light that's completely silent. I put the softbox at roughly a 90-degree angle to the window, so it would fill me in with soft light while still being motivated by the window light. The camera I used was my usual A7 III. I put the TTARTISAN 50mm f.95 lens on it with the black satin 1 filter, a HOYA variable ND filter, and my picture profile was HLG3. To make my camera move, I put it on the SYRP GENIE 2 motion control kit, which allowed me to program a perfectly repeatable camera move. Instead of putting the slider on multiple tripods like you're supposed to do, I used the MANFROTTO GIMBOOM instead to elevate my camera. This is not as steady as tripods would have been, but since I was doing this all by myself, I was looking for any possible way to use less gear. So next I shot 2 passes of the same shot, one including me and the light, and a background pass without the light or me. Then in post, I masked out my half of the foreground pass, I filled it in with the background pass, and then I did some final color correction. Okay, next shot. Here's me working on something or other in my workshop, and to balance out the exposure of the foreground with the background, I used the UL150 plus softbox as my key, and I used the LC500R just to add a bit of accent light to the furniture in front of me. Because it was so bright outside, I had to move the softbox really close to my face to get a decent exposure. And to get the angle of reflection I wanted from the LC500R, I had to put it in the frame near the armoire. And once again, I used my SYRP GENIE for motion control, and I triggered it remotely with the app. The only difference in the camera here was the Sony 28mm f2 lens. In post, I masked out my foreground and I created a separate mask for the accent light. Then I lowered the opacity of that accent light to make it more subtle. And then I brought in the background pass to fill things in and did some final color tweaks. The main thing to pay attention to here is if the lights cross over into any part of the shot where the subject's body is. So in this shot, I just had to keep the lights outside of the area where my body would be in the frame, and then I could pretty much do whatever I wanted with the lighting. Once again, my UL150 was my key light. I shined it through a big bed sheet as diffusion. I raised up my LC500R to use it as a backlight, illuminating my hair and my shoulders. And then I deepened the shadows on the dark side of my face by using a black reflector as negative fill. I didn't use a softbox this time because I wanted that bed sheet to spread out the light as much as possible, creating an even softer source on my face. Both my lights were set to 5600K at 100% output because I wanted them to blend perfectly with the daylight and appear to be coming from the windows. And I used this big reflector to try to take out as much light from the shadow side of my face as possible to create interesting contrast. I changed out lenses to the TTARTISAN 21mm f1.5 to get an even wider field of view. This time I did a lot more passes, starting with the foreground, then backing off the key light and doing just a pass with that light, then a background pass with no lighting, then another background pass where I lowered the exposure to bring back the highlight detail outside the windows. And then in post, I masked out my foreground, I filled it in with the background pass, I brought in my key light pass, setting the blend mode to lighten. And finally, I added the darker background pass, setting the blend mode to darken. In case you're not familiar with the blend modes that I demonstrated there, I'm going to go a little bit more in depth as to how that works. So here we have the background layer, and the blend mode is normal. You can see that here, blend mode normal. And it has all these other blend modes that you can use that control how one clip will interact with another clip when you stack them on top of each other in layers. It's just like Photoshop. So I'm going to leave this one at normal. But for the layer above it, the key light pass, I'm going to want to change that transfer mode. Basically, I only want this layer to brighten what's underneath it. So I'm going to change the blend mode to lighten. Now you don't see any effect yet, but watch what happens when I turn back on the background layer. It's like I just turned a light on in the room. At the moment, all the key light layer is doing is adding brightness to the layer below it. That's why it looks like I'm turning a light on whenever I enable the layer, and it looks like I'm turning a light off when I disable it. So the cool thing about this is I can adjust the opacity, and it's effectively like dimming a light. See that? Okay, so I'm going to set that opacity how I like it, around 60%. Now let's see what it looks like if I change back to normal blend mode and I adjust my opacity. Now it's just doing a straight dissolve between the two layers. So it's affecting both the brightness and the darkness because the two layers have very different overall lighting. That's not what I want. So we go back and change it to lighten. I just enabled the background layer where I had lowered the exposure to keep the windows properly exposed. And I'm going to change the transfer mode here to darken. Now it looks like it didn't do anything. It looks the same. And that's because this is a very dark layer. So basically this image would already be darkening what's below it. But I have one more trick up my sleeve here, and that is the luma keyer effect. So let's turn that effect on. Okay, I have set the luma keyer to remove the darkest elements from this shot. So you can see as I adjust this parameter here, it drops out the shadows. It drops out the darkest parts of the shot. Now, because I have a luma keyer keeping only the brighter parts of the shot, and I have my compositing mode only allowing this layer to darken what's below it, when you put this together with the other layers, you get what looks like an HDR image. There's detail outside the windows, and there's detail in the interior. Now I can adjust the opacity of my darken layer so it looks a little bit more natural, maybe somewhere around there. And if I disable the layer, you see the highlights are blown out. If I re-enable it, I have recovered my highlights. So essentially what I've got going on here is a base layer that sets the overall exposure for the shot, plus a layer that only lightens the base layer, lightening this wall back here, and a layer that only darkens the highlights. So having this fine level of control allows me to blend my layer much more smoothly and seamlessly into the background. So I hope this video has given you sort of a sense of freedom about your lighting. And I'm fully aware that I did not invent this. Lots of filmmakers use split screens to do all sorts of creative stuff. But just because it's been done before, it doesn't mean I can't try it. Alright, thanks for watching. Please do like this video, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you find out as soon as I post something new. Thanks again, I'll see you next time. In this course, you're going to learn the run and gun filmmaking techniques that I've developed over years of practice. And you'll learn how to apply your photography skills toward making great videos. We're going to start with the basics. Here you'll learn how to set up your camera and do basic camera movements, both handheld and on a gimbal. Then I'll teach you how to direct an actor and do basic scene coverage so that you'll be able to shoot a complete scene that cuts together smoothly. Then we'll get into the really fun stuff like complex gimbal moves, shooting out on the street, field audio, and hyperlapses. You'll learn some specialty skills like filming a moving vehicle, action sports, and drone filmmaking. Then the shooting lessons will finish with improvised portraits and a party on the beach, where you'll learn some important skills for low light shooting. Then it's on to editing, where I'll show you the methods I've developed so I can effortlessly work with any amount of footage. First, you'll learn how to import and organize your clips. Then you'll learn to create string outs, scenes, and master projects. Then I'll take you step by step through each scene in the film, showing you exactly how I put it together, and most importantly, why I made my creative decisions. Filmmaking is storytelling, and learning to tell a story with the edit is the most important skill of all. I'll show you how I add sound effects and music, and then we'll do some finishing touches like color correction, audio level mastering, and export. So through the making of this short film, you'll learn essential video skills that have taken me years of real-world practice to develop. So I hope you're excited. Let's go ahead and get started.